Hey, it's Ed here. Welcome to another episode of Let's Play with iOS Music Apps. Today I'm going to be looking at progressions from 4Pockets. It's an app that I use quite frequently to create chord progressions. I also use Scalar, but I use it for different reasons. I do different things in progressions than I do in Scalar. And today I want to talk about what I find interesting and different and useful, and also helpful from a learning perspective in progressions, because it's got some interesting tools built in it that I think I haven't been able to find really in other iOS music apps. Maybe somebody knows of some. Maybe there's some out there for desktop. There's so much stuff. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that and my approach to thinking about chords and how chords fit together smoothly, and how to make interesting chord progressions. And I'm still on my journey, so I'm by no means, at the pinnacle. And I'm going to tell you what I know so far. Hopefully, you'll get something out of it and have fun along the way. That's the goal. So let's get straight into it here. So I've got a chord progression loaded here, which I actually stole from Scalar, which I'm going to pop open right here. Happens to be a part of a song progression called Contemporary R&B 4, and you can see the chords in this top row with next to the A here, right here. If I play these, you get a feel for it, right? Pretty nice, right? Pretty nice and smooth. Now here's the same thing in progressions. I programmed it in, but what I've done is I put Scalar in AUM, and I'm feeding the sound, or the MIDI, I should say, from progressions into Scalar. So the sound's going to be basically the same. The chords will be slightly different because the voicings are slightly different. I think the attack is slightly different on them as well. So let's just take a listen, just to quickly compare. All right, so yeah, pretty close, right? Now, there's different ways you can play these chords and progressions, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But just to get started, and just to show you what I want to talk about, just a little preview here, is I want to talk about these three views on the left pane here in this upper left corner. This is a circle of fifths, of course, with which a lot of people will be familiar with. Now, this second window, I don't exactly know what this is called. It's probably used elsewhere. I don't know if it's used in the same way. Here's another one. I've seen this kind of thing before, this sort of diagram. Now, let me just flip back here. So if you watch this panel on the left and I press a chord, you'll see it highlights it in yellow, and you can sort of see the movement around the circle of fifths, right? Now, if I go here, it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to give me a different view. In this case, it's going to show me the section of the circle of fifths that the chord is in, and it's going to also show me the complexity level, which I think is kind of helpful and interesting. The basic level being the purple color, meaning triads, simple triads. The extreme would be, 13th chords, major ninth, flat five, all these sort of complex things that you might encounter in jazz or classical, things like that. And so let me just give you a quick view of what it looks like in this page right here in this little panel. So if I go F1, now notice, I think you're seeing probably right away, right? The movement on the circle of fifths, you could see it before, but I think it's a little easier to see here with this visual. You can see the chords are moving very closely together among these three sections of the circle of fifths right here in this little pie, right? And similarly, if we go here to this view, now this is going to show a polygon on top of here with the notes of that chord. Simple triads will be a simple triangle. More complex chords will be, five-sided, four-sided, what have you. I'm not going to go into the names, but as you can see here, most of these are fairly basic. In fact, all of these are triads at this point. Now, this is also interesting, I think, because here you can actually see the movement of the notes. I mean, you can look at this keyboard and see where the notes are moving and, possibly see common tones, or maybe the chords, right, which is great. You know what the common tones are. Maybe chords. It's so deep that you know exactly which chords share common tones. I don't know that stuff off the top of my head. So I find this sort of visuals sort of interesting in understanding what's going on in the chord movements that are happening in this progression, for example. And we'll look at some others as well. Now, for example, here we've got 3 notes. Now here we've got 3 notes. Obviously, there's no common tones. They're completely disconnected, right? Now these two, however, share that common tone, that E over there, right? And then this shares 2 common tones, the A and the C in the upper left, right? As you can hear, very closely related sounds, obviously, which is obvious from there. And to me, that sounds, it sounds interesting, and it's an interesting idea to think about these things visually. I don't know how useful it's going to be, for doing anything super complex, but I'm finding it interesting to think about chords in that way. And I use these visual aids in progressions to help me find chords that work together. I listen, but I also look, and it's just interesting to look at it from different perspectives at the same time. All right, so now that's a pretty simple chord progression, obviously, all those triads. We'd have to go into something more complex to show you something a little more complicated, which I'll load in just a second. I'd like to pause just for a moment here to say there's a couple tips now. If you're using progressions, I would recommend doing a couple things. This note velocity down here tends to be set pretty high out of the gate, out of the box by default. I would lower it to something below 90 because if you don't, it's going to be pretty harsh. It's going to hit those keys extremely hard. I don't know why it's set so high. So even if you use this with an instrument like AUM, for example, that velocity set so high is likely to cause some clipping or really send those notes into the upper registers where they may not sound so good. Same thing, this octave here is set, I think, by medium to default. And you'll notice that when I press the chords here and in scalar, they're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close in register. And so I highly recommend setting this octave to low in progressions as well in your songs. Or in your chord progressions when you're creating that. I think it just sounds better, and it's easier to hear those chords. You can certainly change it higher. We could change it to a higher octave if we wanted to. And sounds like that, or even higher yet. It's completely up to you. But let me load up another project here, just to give you a taste of something that I came up with on my own in progressions. And then I'll show you something that I did in scalar just for comparison. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's, we're not going to waste time listening to a whole progression series of songs that I've created. We're going to talk about it while it's playing. So let me just spin this up here real quick. Now you'll notice the colors are a lot more varied, right? Because in this, I've got freedom set to 2, which means I can go wider on the circle of fifths. It allows you to generate chords in a larger section. This complexity is set to medium, so that means it's going to have 7th chords, sus4, flat 5, a few of those, not crazy chords, but in between. So let me just kick this off, and I'm going to press the song button here, and you'll actually see that I've got a song sequence created with these chords. And underneath these chords, I'm not going to go into it. You can go to other videos to see more about this, but basically you can customize each chord to play a different pattern, different number of times, arp, strum, block chords, so on and so forth. So let me just click play so you can get an idea of something that a person could create in progressions using the tool. Now watch these colors. That's a big jump. small jump, small jump, small jump, small jump, big jump. Let's take a look at the shapes over here. Yeah, notice that pattern. Now there's a common tone, right? Right there, the A flat. A little common tone. Looks like a B flat on this one. F sharp on that one. F sharp again, carrying over. F sharp's hanging on. F sharp's hanging on, kind of holding those chords together. Now we're shifting again, right? Yet that F sharp is sort of holding things together. Now we drop to F. All right, let me pause that. So that's kind of what I want to, emphasize here is, this tool is really interesting to use from a visual perspective. Now, you're obviously going to listen to these chords, and you're going to choose chords based on what sounds good, obviously. But I think this visual representation can be quite useful for thinking about chords and how they work, because I'm just going to quickly take a minute here to talk about one of the couple concepts that I'm working with chords and music theory right now, chord progressions, I should say, which is, it's all about smooth movement and moving those notes around smoothly by one or two half steps between chords, and then sharing those common tones to keep that continuity. That's one aspect of it. There's obviously a lot more, but those are two key principles. Bass movement, another key principle. That bass movement, up, down by steps or half steps, that's going to give you some, very nice sounding progressions when you have that moving smoothly. Voice leading, another great principle. Now, I'm not going to talk about bass movement and voice leading here because that's not possible, not going to be possible for me to do. But just to emphasize, the essence of creating good chord progressions, in my view, is, keeping that continuity. You have to make it interesting and varied, but not so varied that it doesn't make sense, right? It has to be varied, but it has to make sense. Got to have those two things balanced. So anyway, let me get back. So let's pop over to Scalar. Now I'm just gonna go over here to Scalar and load up a session that I saved before. Let's look at, let's see, where is it? Pop one. All right, let's just load this one up. Let's just take a listen to this. Now, I'm just going to comment on that. Now, Scalar, it's got so many fantastic chord progressions in it, right? And they're designed to sound interesting. And these are based on songs and music theory and all sorts of things, So they're based on all sorts of principles that are going to make them sound good. And they're voiced in a way that's going to make sense. They're going to follow notes. Those notes are going to follow patterns that are going to lead your ear along the way smoothly from one to the next. It's going to tell a story. It's going to have a direction. It's going to have ups and downs, right? All that sort of thing going on. That's what you're going to get with Scalar, all that fancy stuff. And then you can go over here and you can go into the modulation. You can go into secondary scale, modal interchange, neo-Riemannian. It's going to show you how to, you're going to give you choices for chords. I'm not going to go into that here. I'm just gonna touch on it just because I want you to recognize I get what Scalar does, and it's amazing and very, very impressive. But really, what it is, it's just a massive collection of chord progressions and tools at your disposal that you can pull out. Lots of ways, if you learn how to use it. There's a lot of ways you can use it as instant way to get a song together and get going. And and any genre you want, you've got tons to choose from. But let me talk about progressions here, and what I like about progressions. So the difference for me is, I can go into progressions and I can create something that's completely outside the box. It may not sound, typical. Hopefully it sounds interesting, and hopefully it sounds good. And that's really for me where it's at with progressions, and to get new and interesting sounds. So let me just load up, for example, let me go over here, load up another example that I did from progressions real quick, just to give you an idea of the wide differences that you can achieve with progressions. This didn't take a whole lot of time, so this is just another one right here. I'll just spin it up really quick. All right, so you get the idea, right? And there's some more chords in that, but we may save that for another episode when I go deeper into some of the things that I've created. But what I want to touch on really is, you can create chord progressions that sound nothing at all like anything that you're going to find in Scalar. Maybe you can come up with on your own. Sure, maybe you could. I find this tool very helpful. So let me pop in here and just go to a new project and just show you how you could start from scratch, basically, and create something brand new, and we'll see what happens. Let me make sure nothing's loaded up in Scalar. All right, yep, good deal. So I've got something here that I put together a little while ago, and let me just give you a couple chords out of this, and I'm going to reset it then. All right, so I started on something and didn't spend too much time on it. Let me do a new session. So let's just try a brand new session, and I'm going to show you how you can use progressions to generate a brand new chord progression from scratch with some suggestions. Now, you could go in here and you click this generate. You can fill up this entire panel if you just click and hold this generate button right here. It's going to give you a bunch of chords that aren't really going to make a progression. Now, you could pick and choose from this. I don't prefer to work that way. I prefer to just go new session. I'm going to pick a key like E, for example. I'm going to choose a mode, minor, because I tend to find minor a little more interesting. I'm going to select a freedom of wide. Basically, that indicates how wide of a selection of the circle of fifths this can move around in. And complexity, I'm going to put it medium. We don't want to get too crazy here, because if we put it up at extreme, it's going to suggest crazy chords, and that's not going to be real helpful. Now, if you want to experiment, feel free, but I'd suggest, 2 and medium is probably a good starting point. So let's just see where this goes. So the first chord is fixed. It's the root chord. You can't change that. I'm just going to click generate once here, and I'm going to click next. And let's see how that sounds. I think it sounds a little bit weird, but let's find out. That's a little too weird. Let me try again. A little too weird. Try again. A little too weird. All right. Let me change the complexity to low. Let's try again. I think that might have been a little too high for this little experiment. So let's do generate. Next. That's better. All right, I could work with that. Let's see what this sounds like. Let's turn on the arpeggiator here. Let's just try this chord progression. And let me set this to open chords too and just reset. So what I'm doing is I'm turning on open chords, which is going to change these voicings, as you can see, to open chord voicings. I should have done that at the beginning. I would highly recommend you do that in general as well. Let's just see how this sounds with the default A arpeggiator pattern. Not bad, not bad. I mean, it's a little strange, but it might go somewhere. Let me see. Let me see what we can do here. Let's just try generate again, and let's just let it play through and see what happens. All right, hey, not bad, not bad. I think that could use some work, but not bad. I would say, you know. And you know what? I forgot to turn these down, which is what I mentioned that you should do at the start. So let's just play that again with it a little lower. I'll just play part of it. Yeah, notice I think that sounds a little better in the lower register there. So I think that does sound better. So yeah, I think you can do a lot of good things with this. Now let me show you one more thing. So basically, I'm just letting Scalar kind of suggest chords. Now if you wanna pick your own chords, you can absolutely do that. Now if you go here, for example, and you say there's a couple different ways to do this, but you can do like next. Then you can do this option. You have an option to replace. You can press this replace button, and you can change the chord that's there. And it lets you play the previous chord. Now this is where the visuals come in handy, right? Your visuals maybe in addition to your ear. Because I got this A minor, right, or the circle of fifths, right? I got this A minor. Now, just to the right of that, I've got G and E minor and F and D minor, right? And it's decided to give me G minor, which is over here, 2 steps over on the circle of fifths, as you can see. So I don't know. Let's see how that A minor and G minor sound together. Let's take a look, or a listen, I should say. Yeah, that's not bad, not bad. Let's try adding one more chord. All right, that's getting a little boring, I think. We went back to that F. So let's try replace. And let's see. So we came from this G minor, which we can also press here to play it. So we've got A minor, G minor. And now I can select from this list of choices. It's suggesting choices for me. It's not always the best, but it gives you some options and some ideas, and sometimes it leads somewhere. Let's see. So what would be a good choice? So we got this B flat G minor here, right? Proceed by the A minor. So we've got this G minor over here, and we could move over one. Maybe we could go over one more. So let's go back to the replace. Now the C would be one more over on the circle of fifths. Let's just see how that sounds. We'll do previous. All right, I think that could work. Yeah, maybe. Let's try those 3 chords, the last 3 chords in sequence, and see what happens. Yeah. I think that's not bad. That's not bad. Nothing fancy, right? But not bad. The other thing you can do is you can pull down. You can press and pull downward if you want to replace the chord with suggestions. Now, if you want to put in your own chord, let me get this right. You can swipe left, hold and swipe left, and you can choose any chord that you want. For example, I could choose maybe a variation on C. I could choose maybe C dominant 7th, for example, or maybe a C minor 7th, no 5th. Let's try it. See what it sounds like. Let's try that. Yeah, that's a little outside, right? Probably not a great choice. So let's try again. Maybe a C minor. All right, not quite as consonant as the C, but it might be leading somewhere. But anyway, I think you get the idea. You can use these combinations. You can see these chords that share common tones. This one here, you can see the common tone. This one, you can see the common tone. Here, common tone. Notice how that F keeps, recurring over and over again. It kind of holds those together. Here, the G is kind of holding these two chords together. So you can listen and you can look at the same time. And I think it's really an interesting combination of approaches to listen and have that visual aspect to it. So if you'll bear with me, I just want to talk a little bit more. You can stop here, feel free, skip if you haven't already, if you're still with me. I want to just talk about a couple of other things here that can come in handy. So let's say we got this, let's change this back to a C again, a plain old C, right? Because that sounded pretty good. So let's keep this chord progression. And now let's see what happens if we mix things up a little bit, right? Let's go into this arpeggiator here, and we're going to play this. And we're going to mess with the arpeggiator patterns. All right, so you got basically, there's 5 patterns built in. Now you can go in here and you can load your own patterns, for example, like this one. Let's see, this one I created. Let's see how this one sounds with this set of chords. Yeah, a little different, right? And you got strummer here as well. Not sure how it's going to sound with these. Basically, you can strum the chords. Also, block chords right here. You can use block chords which play it together, or you can use ascending chord tones straight out of the pattern. So if we hit block chords and we play this now. So right there, see what I'm getting at is like, say you got a bunch of chords, right? And you just want to quickly see, what can we do with those chords? What can we make them sound like? To me, this just generates ideas and different ways that chords can fit together. Maybe I'll hear a note that I like in those combinations. Maybe I'll hear a leading pattern between those chords, something that ties them together that I might not hear otherwise. Another interesting thing to do here is mess with this measure length, right? So the measure length, if I put it on something like 5 beats and I put it back on a arpeggiator here, let me put it back on something a little plainer. You can really kind of play around with patterns on these. In fact, let me load a different pattern completely. And this one has 5 beats. All right, let's take a listen. This one's a completely different one that I created earlier. Now this one's got 5 beats. There's some other settings on here, which you can find out about in the other videos. But let me just show you the difference. This is going to be a little more varied. Let me load up another pattern here, like, let's see, how about this one? That's a pretty short one. What about this one here? And then let's put it on 4. Let me change it to 5. Notice it kind of gives it a little floating feel, because that those 5 beats are not what you're expecting. So I'll just stop there. I hope that's been interesting. I wanted to show you some of the things that I really think are interesting and useful about progressions. And I might do a second one if anybody has questions, if you have things that you want to see in progressions or that you want to know about that you haven't tried and would like to see in action, or you'd like to know something about other ways that I use progressions, feel free to leave in the comments. So thanks for listening, and take care. Have a good one.